where we celebrate the extraordinary multi-potentiality of non-linear thinkers and their undeniable impact on the world. I'm your host, Aiden Gillan-Bronze, and today I'm joined by Miguel Martins, innovative strategist, strategic innovator, driver of sustainable growth, and steerer of global change. Finally, someone whose career is more intersectional than their equal opportunities forum. As a founding member of the Octopus Movement, Miguel's innovatively strategic tentacles have helped shape this group's powerful vision. Linear meets non-linear, the human mycelium grows, unsolvable solved, and sustainable future blooms. This episode is billed as essential for anyone interested in understanding the critical role of innovation and strategic planning in international development and sustainability, but I'm sure the rest of us will enjoy it too. Miguel, surely being a multi-potentialite can only be an asset with a career more intersectional than Shibuya Crossing. How did you discover your love for strategically innovative sustainable growth steering and driving of global change?
Aiden, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. To your question, we only have 30 minutes and it's a long story.
I know. You've got a long accomplishment there. So what was it that first made you realize that you were interested in so many different things career-wise?
You know, I started my professional career in banking in Portugal. I was born in Africa. I moved to Portugal when I was a child, and I started my professional career in a bank in Portugal. That at a certain point in time decided to open a bank from scratch in Mozambique. And
the original Monzo Bank, was it?
I'm sorry.
It could have been the original Monzo Bank with the name.
Exactly. No, that's totally true. So what happened was I was planning on volunteer to go to Mozambique until before I volunteered, I was asked to go back. And Mozambique at that point in time, this was end of 95, was considered the poorest country in the world. Right? So we moved to Mozambique. We bring a very European, Western European approach to banking. What we were doing in Mozambique was nothing special compared to what we did in Western Europe. But for Mozambique, it was totally innovative. It was it was a game changer in Mozambique.
I mean, Miguel, your vision is legendary, but opening a bank in the poorest country in the world seems exceptionally visionary. What inspired you to do that? Like, what was the vision behind it?
Do you know, honestly, the reason why I accepted the challenge was because I really wanted to go back to my home country.
Okay.
I didn't know I was leaving as a child, and I wanted to go back to my home country. But that's, that special moment that you asked for happened when I was there 9 months after we opened the bank. The bank broke in 9 months. It started generating profits in less than 12 months. And that special moment was there when I realized that I wanted something more out of my career. That I didn't want that to be my legacy, because we started making money very fast. We were very successful from a financial point of view, but I didn't feel good that we were in the poorest country in the world, and we weren't giving anything back to the country. We weren't giving anything back to the communities, and that for me was a little bit my haha moments. There were several of them along my path, but that was a little bit my haha moment where I was like, I want to do more than this.
So social responsibility wasn't what it is today in 1995 in the banking sector.
It wasn't. So that in itself, it came very organically to me, because as I said, moving to Mozambique, I knew it was a great career opportunity, but maybe the best reason to move there, the reason why I moved there was not so much because of that as wanting to go back to the motherland. Right?
So that's when you discovered that you are interested in so many different things. But can you remember the moment when you kind of went, aha, I'm not quite the same as everyone else, or my mind works a bit differently to everyone else's? Was that the same moment, or did it happen?
Oh, no. Actually, Aiden, I've asked that question to myself, and I always struggle a little bit with the answer, because, I think I always felt like that. Because since a child, I always felt that I didn't fit in. even when I was in Mozambique as a child, I kept feeling that. But it became obvious when I moved to Portugal in 1974, at the end of '74, because Mozambique was a little bit of a melting pot, right? It is Africa. There was a fairly large European community there, but we also had large Indian, Chinese community. So it was literally a melting pot, right? You could see the diversity, but also the inclusion of what we are as a species. You could see it there. Then I come to Portugal.
Why are all these groups drawn to the world's poorest country, if you don't mind me asking? It doesn't seem like an intuitive draw for...
No, I think in the case of Mozambique was more of its geographic location. It used to be a Portuguese colony, so hence the European influence. Then, of course, it was along the spice route, so you had all the influence, and the Portuguese went all the way to India and Asia. So, and then returning to Europe by sea, it was a safe haven, and people kept staying. So I think there was not so much that it was an emerging market, it was more of its geographical location. But for me, what was fascinating was coming back to Portugal in '74. And I mean, I don't mean to be negative about this, but in '74, as a child, I was barely a teenager. I found Portugal extremely gray, right? Everybody was gray. There was, on one side there's
Ireland in the '90s, but yeah.
On one side you have the melting pot that is Mozambique. On the other side you have a country like Portugal where everybody was white, everybody was straight, everybody was Catholic, and you went to conform. And that for me was, even though I was just getting into my early teens, that for me was a problem, because I mean, I could feel it in my bones that I didn't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And for the longest time, and this, I'm giving you the personal angle, but it professionally ended up being the same. My struggle always started by, I want to change to fit in, until I realized that I shouldn't. Right. But, to your question, it started at a very early stage, and it's something that has been, I would say, always present throughout my life.
So there's always a trade-off there. And so obviously we feel that need to change, to conform, because, not conforming comes with a price to it. So having that realization that you shouldn't or don't need to fit in also needs to come with that acceptance of the consequences of not fitting in, which in Catholic conformist countries can be quite severe. How did you negotiate that balance then, as you negotiated that fitting in for yourself?
I would say that initially I started by creating a divide or a Chinese wall between my personal life and my professional life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was a very strong believer that, okay, professionally I need to fit in the box. Even though it is not me, I need to, be part of the mainstream. So
I'm Lisbon in the streets, Mozambique in the sheets. I get you. Yeah.
Exactly. You get me. Yeah. So, but then what I started doing was, personally, that's where I started getting creative, right? Getting creative, but more than getting creative, that's where I started my acceptance process, right? But then, it became obvious that those Chinese walls don't work, right? You can't be a totally different person in a business environment and then on a personal environment. So there was a lot of internal growth. It's something that even today in Portugal people don't talk openly about, but this was not a path that I've gone through on myself. I actually ended up doing therapy through a number of years because I was really struggling with it.
Because you grew up in Mozambique?
No, because I didn't fit in the box.
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah.
I mean, there was a bit of that as well, because there's in those days there was millions of people coming from the former colonies in Africa coming to Portugal, so there was that negative reaction. There was even a word for us that were coming from Africa and coming to Portugal, right? So there was some negative connotation there.
You're getting it from all angles, Miguel, weren't you?
Sorry, it's all the tentacles, right?
When did you fully land with no walls, no Chinese walls, no really, I would say not hesitation, but no fear, I suppose, just fully present in yourself and say, kind of, stake your flag in the ground. This is it. This is who I am in all parts of my life, fully realized. When was that, Miguel?
It was when I moved back to Mozambique.
Back to Mozambique. So Mozambique held the key.
It was when I moved back because it was, it's not that it's difficult to explain this. It's difficult to summarize it in just a few of words. I don't think I ever fully fit in. I mean, I'm back to Portugal now. I went to Mozambique for 5 years, then 20 years to the US, and now back to Portugal. Coming back to Portugal just before COVID, it's the first time I'm in Portugal, and I feel that I fit in. Right? I fit in my own personal idea of what fitting in is. What happened was it was a long struggle professionally and personally. And then because of that, I wanted to leave the country. And my objective was to go back to Mozambique, to go back to where I was born. And it was when I went back that all of a sudden I had this aha moment that, wait a minute, it is okay not to conform. And this is where I finally, and of course I feel and I know that it was linked to the fact that I was back home in a way, that it's when I finally got the courage, to spread my wings.
And so that's great. But, and has there been any fallout from spreading those wings? Have you flown too close to any suns, or have you, has there been any pushback or any sort of any cons, I suppose, to that, or has it just been positive the whole time?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. I mean, it was without. It's not that I have a problem getting too personal, but to answer that question, the best example is to get a little bit personal. It created problems, for instance, with my family. Right? Because I come from a family that tends to be very traditional, and didn't accept. I mean, most of the pushback I actually got was from my own family, which was supposed to be my safe haven, and it turned out to be a little bit the opposite. It's also one of the reasons why I decided to move back to Mozambique, because it was not just moving back to Mozambique; it was also getting away from everything. I don't think at that point in time I had the sense that I was being held back. It was only when I left that I realized, wait a minute, this was the right thing to do because I was being held back. Now, what I had to do there was to accept the cons, right? The cons of, spreading my wings. And there was, I mean, I cannot say that it's one of those situations where, all of a sudden I spread my wings and breath of fresh air, everything is rosy. It wasn't. But let me tell you, I wouldn't change it.
No, it's true. I mean, as I tell a lot of my coaching clients, other people's problem with who you are is exactly that, other people's problem. And so nothing for you to have to deal with at all. But thinking again about our Octopus Movement vision and thinking of linear meets non-linear, your position as a pivotal figure in the banking, sustainability, economic, emerging market world is attributed to your exceptional relationship building skills. So what's your secret for looking like you care in a way that doesn't attract suspicion?
I think the main reason, the main aspect there is that you're honest with yourself and you are transparent. And when you start trying to connect those pieces and build those bridges, that comes across in you, right? I mean, one of the things that I considered myself very lucky for was that I was born in a culture that was very different, was uprooted to something totally different in Portugal, then going back. It was interesting that when I got back, Mozambique was not what I thought it was, or of course it changed because it went through a civil war. And then I realized, which was a little bit frustrating, that while I was there enjoying being there, I actually missed parts from Portugal, right?
Mm.
But what that experience gave me was something that even today I consider very important when we talk about relationship building, is respect, right? It's
Yeah.
like it's one of the things it's one of the things that I answered very fast when we're having complicated conversations, which is I accept people telling me that they don't agree with me. I don't accept people that don't know me telling me that I'm wrong, right? I may be wrong according to the framework with which other people live, right? So I think in the end, it's all about respect. It's about learning to listen, being honest, and being transparent. And this is something that, you know, whenever I'm trying to build relationships and connecting to, you know, different organizations and different people, wherever they come from, I always try to put first that respect. I may not agree with the positioning, but I need to have that flexibility of trying to understand where the person is coming from.
And is that even with linear thinkers, Miguel? You like to include them too, or you just leave them in the dust and carry on regardless?
Oh, I love to include them.
Okay, fine. Just
I love
checking, just checking.
I love to include. I love to rock their world.
Oh God, how do you do it in a way that doesn't get you in trouble? I haven't learned how to do that yet.
I mean, a lot of times I do get in trouble.
Okay.
Maybe more times, more often than not. But you know, it's again, there's something that I don't think exists a lot in our world today, and that's trust. Right,
Mm.
and trust takes time to build. I mean, you lose it in a second, but it takes time to build.
Mm.
And one of the things that you know, I honestly, you know, I have a lot of people around me that tell me, "Oh, we don't like people. We like to be in our corner. COVID was great because we were in our corner." I actually like people. You
Yeah, no,
are?
I'm with them. But yeah, cool.
Yeah, I actually like people, right? Because
What's that like?
I love to learn from the diversity, from the different backgrounds that people bring in, and I find it that with linear thinking thinkers, and you know, and you mentioned it that you know I went through the financial sector. You have
Mm.
a lot of linear thinkers there,
Mm.
but you know, I think it's a little bit there's a former colleague of mine that was one of the most linear thinkers that I've ever met. And we ended up becoming friends. And we have this habit of once a month having a lunch and discuss. And one of the things that I proud myself of was I think I took her a little bit out of the box.
Mm.
But this came from, you know, it's that slow relationship building. It takes time. You need to invest time. And it takes time because you need to build the trust.
Well, anyone who likes people, I challenge to go to Poplar Post Office at 4 o'clock on a Friday and come out feeling the same way, to be very honest. Human mycelium grows. Your leadership style facilitates effective collaboration and innovation. How do you do that, though? What is it about your leadership style in particular that facilitates collaboration and innovation between people? How do you get those juices flowing between two people?
Um, I think some people call me naive.
Okay.
I don't. You know, I hear a lot that you know this person they were born bad. You know, there's you know it's the soul. You know, if we're going to get into the conversation with the soul, it would
Oh,
take
there's no
forever.
bad souls. No bad
Yeah,
souls.
so live that. But I really believe that when we are born with a clean slate. And if something goes wrong, it has to do with the programming. You know, it may be the cultural programming, it may be the religious programming, the family programming. And so for me, uh, building that relationship, and, you know, I love the word mycelium because it was talking the first time with Perry that he mentioned human mycelium for the first time to me. But, you know,
I thought he
because
was
I love
trying to tell me.
mycelium.
I thought he was trying to sell me shrooms, to be honest. But anyway, yeah, yeah.
Well, but you know, that was my point. It actually happened that my first connection or hearing mycelium was the wood wide web, right? The biological mycelium that ends up being your assurance. So, you know, I thought in terms of the image of human mycelium, I think it's great, because what I think is happening is the human species can be a human mycelium, but we are programmed not to be, right? I think that a lot of what is taught to her, what I like to call the programming, is actually separating us, right? And I think that what's critical when you're trying to build relationships is mending those connections.
I see that's an interesting take on it. Now, I'm not sure I agree that we come in with a clean slate, because I recently found out that the trauma from this life wasn't enough. I've got past life trauma as well. I mean, when does it end? I mean, these therapists, they'll take anything from past life and we're still dealing with it. EMDR apparently not as effective if it's not in this life. Who knew? But speaking of this unsolvable solved and kind of the gaps between us, your projects drive economic growth while ensuring ecological sustainability. So this to me screams hemp scarves. Surely not. What is ecological sustainability in combination with economic growth? What does that look like in a non-mung bean and Birkenstock sort of way?
Oh my God, you're asking such big questions.
I know. I did warn you.
Yeah, you did. You're right there. I mean, Aiden, I think there's a number of things. There's a big conversation now around growth and degrowth, right? A lot of people are calling for degrowth if we are going to lead more sustainable lives, right?
Okay.
I mean, for me, this conversation is a little bit like semantics. We live in a world where everything needs to be rethought and restructured, right? We need to rethink the way we live, the way we consume.
That sounds like reinventing the wheel, Miguel. I'm not sure that we need to start doing that, do we?
No, but look, I think where we need to start is, because you mentioned the environmental aspects and growth. I think what we need to understand is that our business models stem from something that was invented during the first industrial revolution, which was the creation of GDP, right? GDP was created to measure the economic or financial capital that was produced.
GDP, was that one of the looms they used for weaving in the Industrial Revolution, or what one was that? That was one of the thrashers for the wheat?
Yes.
The financially illiterate of us.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was created by Kuznets, and the idea was to measure the impact of.
Oh, it's a measuring device. Okay, got it.
Right. What we forget is that we are in the fourth industrial revolution, and we keep using a measure that is outdated. Because why? Because GDP measures the economic or financial capital that we produce. It doesn't measure the natural capital, and it doesn't measure the human capital, right? So let me put this in an image that's very easy. When you cut a tree, GDP measures what you do with the wood, right? It measures how much do you sell that wood for, and then you transform into furniture or building materials, and how much and that ends up in the national accounts. What it doesn't measure is the negative impact of cutting down a tree. And we need to start measuring that, because there's negative impacts. And if we don't measure that, people won't know, right? So when I think about growth, I think we need to continue growing. But I think the growth that we need to continue having is a growth that measures all these variables. Because otherwise, I mean, I'm a strong believer that we are where we are, very close to the collapse of the ecosystems. I mean, we have breached most of the planetary boundaries that we have. And I think part of the reason for that is because we are just measuring economic and financial capital. We are not measuring the negative impacts that we are having on environments.
And why aren't we measuring them? Are they measurable?
They are. I mean, if you look at the 8 capitals that we have, some of them are tangible, others are intangible. Right. Of course.
But are they intangible to the point of abstract, or like, are they imagined, or are they like actual, or like, measurable, quantifiable?
I can give you a specific example on one of that.
Ozone, is that even real?
Yeah, no, I can give you a specific example. I was involved in a project that measured when I was with I still am in a way with the World Bank group. That was the objective was to measure the value of the mangroves. okay, in Thailand. And even before we got there, we knew that, and this was done in 2016, 2017. Even before we got to Thailand, we knew that the economic value of a mangrove was around $1,000 per hectare, right? But then we started measuring the natural and human capital. And what did I do? We just scratched the surface. We didn't measure everything. But even on economic capital, we don't measure all the variables. We don't know how to do that, right? It's more difficult to measure natural and human capital. But the example was if, for instance, if you cut down those mangroves, there's no flood protection. They stop sequestering carbon. The ecosystems change. The fish move elsewhere. There's no bees. That means that the fishermen villages, the men cannot fish. The women cannot go to the fields and pick up. Do you know what's the value of cutting down the mangroves in Thailand in 2016-17? It was $23,000 negative. Now, and we just measure a couple of variables. So if you cut down 1 hectare of mangroves to earn $1,000, when you know that the impact you have, it's minus $23,000, are you still going to cut those mangroves?
But is this all like speculative money, like the way is this all like the bank's approach to making speculative money rather than actually cash in hand? Or is this all financial self-inflation, or not self-inflation in the financial sense, but self-puffing over time? Or is it actually just relating to real things? Because there must be examples where we've measured a negative something, and when we've done that, has it had a positive impact? Has measuring the negative had a positive impact?
Yeah. So, Aiden, if you go to a supermarket and you want to buy a chocolate bar,
I don't. Right? There's people there. I just get it delivered. But okay.
Okay, perfect. But then you need to decide if you want to go with a bar that is considered a sustainable or an ethical bar.
I don't.
You don't?
Yeah. No.
Okay. Bye.
All right. They're always way more expensive and they don't taste as nice.
But there's a difference in price, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and what people say is that, one of the problems with sustainable products or products that are considered sustainable is that they are more expensive.
Yes, and they make you look like you are vegan when you're not. And you don't want to look like a vegan.
Okay, so there we are aligned. I could not go down that route.
Nothing wrong with being a vegan, but I just don't want to have that vegan appearance. The archetypal vegan appearance. Nothing wrong with being a vegan. Support it wholeheartedly, but do you know what I mean? I just don't want to look like I wear Birkenstocks at the weekends when I don't have to. That's all. That's all. That's just my perception of it.
Yeah, that's part of us.
In the making of this podcast.
We don't care about it, right? We don't care about those things, right? No, but
this financial discussion kind of leads me to my last question about sustainable future blooms, which is what actually are emerging markets and why are they being so coy? How can we get them to just put their goodies out on display for all of us to see?
Well, I actually, the expression emerging markets were coined by the World Bank. And I actually love that expression, right? And I love that expression because, we can go on talking about these themes and it can be very doom and gloom, right? I jokingly say that the world is in such a state that it's too late to be a pessimist. We need to be optimist. For me, being pessimist was also had this connotation of giving up, right?
Yeah, that is optimistic for some of us, but yeah, okay.
Yeah. But so I try to be optimist because if I go down the pessimist route, I think I'll just give up on a number of things. The thing with emerging markets, to get to your question, is the reason why I like it. It's a positive term when you compare it to underdeveloped countries or developing countries.
Oh, I see. That's what emerging markets are. Okay.
But there's another angle there, right? Because if you say emerging market, and this is personal, right? This is not the reason why they call it emerging markets, but my view of this, and it's another reason why I love it, is if you don't use emerging markets, you need to say developing or underdeveloped countries, which means that there's a world, which is the world where you and I live in, that are called the developing countries. Right? Look at the world today. Are we really developed? I question that. Right? And this is one of the reasons why I love that expression, emerging markets.
So then are we in an emerged market then? Are we like a fully out there flasher market, or what's going on?
You and I are supposed to be in the developed side of the world, right? I mean, I question that.
Well, anyone who makes that claim, I simply refer them back to Popular Post Office 4 o'clock on a Friday and just come back to me then.
Exactly.
So what action, Miguel, can our listeners take, the linear and the non-linear thinkers alike, to embrace this Jedi level intersectionality in their own lives and their own careers?
Aiden, I can tell you what I try to do every morning, right? I went through a phase of my life where I don't think I was enjoying myself as much as I do now, or as I did before, where I would sleep with a cell phone or the iPad next to my bedside table, and I wasn't even out of bed and I was already checking the news and all of that, right? And what changed my life was leaving those outside of the bedroom. And I don't care if it is urgent or not. I actually got to the point where even if I have something that might be urgent, I don't start there, right? I mean, in my case, I'm a coffee drinker.
I hope I don't have a heart attack next to you, but okay, that sounds sensible. Yeah.
I'm a coffee drinker, right? So what I do every morning, I'm not the type of person, but I don't think non-linear people are. I don't like routines, but this routine for me is important. I wake up, I prepare my coffee, and I sit down with myself, right? And if I have an early morning meeting, then I put the alarm clock for earlier. That check-in with myself every morning is critical. And this is something I would recommend.
Well, that's perfect. So listeners, check in with yourself every morning with a cup of coffee and stay out of Miguel's bedroom. So that brings this week's episode of the Octopus Movement.
You have a cell phone.
My thanks to Miguel Martins for sharing his wisdom, insights, and multi-potential mind with us today. If anyone would like to reach out to you, Miguel, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
I think, Aiden, the best would be my LinkedIn. There's a trick.
Perfect.
There's several Miguel Martins. The trick there to find me
is only one Miguel Martin.
J. Martins.
Miguel J. Martins, of course. If you've got questions about how you can join the movement or want to discuss other reasons that people are awful on Popular Post Office at 4 o'clock on a Friday, feel free to reach out to me, Aiden Gillan-Bronze, on LinkedIn, and or visit the Octopus Movement website at octopusmovement.org. Never forget that every mind, even the ones in Popular Post Office at 4 o'clock on a Friday, has the potential to be an octopus mind. Embrace your unique way of thinking, join the movement, and make something tentacular happen. Our podcast returns at the same time every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks. And for those of you who celebrated, I hope you've had a very wonderful Pride Month. See you then. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.